Okay, welcome back. We're here at Time for Forgiveness. Bob Pascuzzi, Kelly Pascuzzi, and we've got John Burke back with us. Um, really going to get into some really in-depth information that's going to, I think, not only help you, teach you, but also inspire you to think and act, perhaps, and guard your the door to your mind, because words and thoughts are things. And we talked about this in episode one. If you didn't see this, go back and watch episode one. It'll help you segue into our conversation today. So, John, welcome. Thank you so much again. We're going to get into a personal experience that you had around this idea of how the thoughts that we entertain over time can actually become real things and cause us to behave or act in certain ways. So I'm going to let you pick this up and kind of share your story.
Yeah, so this is kind of a wild one. I had been a pastor for, I don't know, 20 years. It wasn't new to me. And one day I'm reading the Bible, and Isaiah 41:9, as I'm reading along, it just like felt like it jumped off the page at me. And it said, I have not rejected you. I have chosen you. Um, do not be afraid, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will rescue you by my righteous right hand. And I don't know why, but it just like it hit me so much. Kind of, we were talking about how promptings from God kind of come to the thoughts in the heart. And many times you have to learn to discern, wow, why did I think that? Or why is that such a strong thought? And it was, so I actually wrote that verse down and I put it right there on my desk. And I didn't know why. It had a reason. And I journal. That's part of how I've grown in my relationship with God, is I journal my prayers and the things that I'm picking up, and I can look back and I can see, oh my gosh, look, God really is at work in my life, because I forget sometimes, right? We all do.
Sure.
So I put this verse down, I've not rejected you. Don't be dismayed. I am your God. I'm with you, all that. And then it set into a season it was the most dismaying attack, it felt like, from every single angle you can imagine. And I won't go into all of it, but I mean, that year, my mom gets Alzheimer's, and we start a slow 8-year journey to death. And I mean, if you guys know about Alzheimer's, it's pretty
Yeah,
brutal.
horrible.
Um, uh, Things happen to my kids, the church, like all of a sudden, all these leaders kind of rise up in deciding, we're going over here and taking a bunch of people. And it was just like all this chaos. First time ever, people on my staff had all these immorality issues, and I had to fire people, and nothing like this had ever happened. And it happened for about 2 years, 3 years. And I kept trying to do the right thing. Like, okay, God, what do I do? And I kept praying and I kept asking, and I kept trying to do the right thing. And, and it was like the waves kept crashing, kept crashing. And I'll tell you, so confession, after 5 years, the thoughts in my head that I regularly told myself, now originally I don't think they came from me, but I started to believe them. You're a terrible leader. God's spirit is not with you anymore. You know, you're never going to be able to change this. I mean, there was this series of about 5 things that, and it drove me into a depression. So I literally became depressed, and I'd never been depressed in my life. Um, and what I learned through that was that, God, I believe, had warned me, this is going to happen. Don't believe the lies. I have not rejected you. But I thought maybe he has. And why? Well, because the circumstantial evidence was reinforcing that.
Right. Everything on the outside was telling you
There
one thing.
were circumstantial things, and I could
Right.
point to them and say, well, look and
What about
look and
this?
look.
Right. Hmm.
And this is the challenge of it, right? Because I have to believe what God says is true, even when this broken, evil world is reinforcing that something else is true. But I didn't. I confess I failed, and I was not leading well. I was believing I'm not a good leader. I can't lead. Well, I mean, I don't say this bragging, but I'm just saying my wife and I started a church from 5 people in a living room, and it grew to 5,500 people, 5,000 people coming to faith. I can lead. I am a leader. That's a gift God
Right. You
gave
would have
me.
never got that far if you couldn't. Right.
But I didn't believe that at the time. I
But
could not
but it
accept.
also takes, like, thinking is hard sometimes. It takes great thinking to be able to reject the circumstance and everything on the outside of those things that we really can't control. But when you said the thought over 5 years, that is like a dominant thought, because you'll go, well, what are you thinking? No, what is your most dominant thought that even the whisper, it may not even be like we said earlier that you're saying, but it is even at such an unconscious level that it's coming and you're not even aware of it, but it is a dominant thought.
So, John, how did you pivot and reverse this? Like,
Yeah, so I went into a depression. I took a break from leading the church for 3 months. And here's the other thing: if you've ever struggled with depression, you want to withdraw from people, and you don't want to listen to anybody, and that's the exact opposite of what you need to do. And that makes it really tough. But I did have some friends, pastor friends, who were really pursuing me, reaching out to me, and I did respond ultimately to them. They get doing counseling, and as well, what a good friend who is a counselor did for me that was wonderful is he gave me a daily mantra of what God says is true against these 5 lies that I had actually come to accept. So every day I wrote them down. I wrote down verses from the Bible about them. I realized I had an epiphany, like, oh my gosh, that's why I put that verse on my desk.
how long did how much time had elapsed before you came
Fi-
back to Isaiah 41:9?
5 years.
5 years. Wow.
I'm
Did-
stupid.
Did this? How did you become aware of that
I mean,
verse?
you look
Did it
at
just
that
show
and you
up on your
go,
desk, or and it hits you like?
yeah, I saw it. I saw it. And I was like, oh my gosh,
That's it.
you were warning me that this was going to happen. And you were trying to tell me, don't believe that. This is what's true. I have not rejected you. You know, I have chosen you, I think, to lead this. Do not be dismayed. Don't give in to dismay. And see, that is how I think evil works is, every little thing that happened, once I was wounded, every little thing that happened, there was this, we'll see, and it's never going to get better. And, you can't. And that just sunk me into deeper dismay. And I learned some things during this. One, the way our brains work as well is our thoughts do have power, and they even shape the neural pathways, and the ones that get traced over again and again become like habits, just like you guys were saying. We just habitually think that. We habitually go there. But there's this thing called neuroplasticity. You can rewire your brain. You can reshape those neural pathways and which ones are dominant. And so this daily practice that I did for over a year, where I daily said these things that I wrote down with a friend, and that was true to Scripture, against these lies that were tanking me. And I said them every single day. Now, I didn't believe them at first.
Right.
So it was
And
was
that's
an act
okay,
of
right?
faith.
I think that's an
Right.
important,
No.
you recognizing that, because that's okay that you didn't believe it at first, but through the repetition, you were re-engineering what had happened through the repetition of the wrong ideas. Now it's through the repetition of the right ideas.
Right. And so it was things like, God has not rejected me. He's told me he is with me. And I reject the dismaying thought that he's abandoned me. That's a lie. I am a good leader. God has done things through me to help many people, and I still can lead. There were, like I said, there were 5 of them, some more personal.
Right.
But as I did this every day, it took about a year, and I came out of it.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's a beautiful thing that you just explained, that you came out of that, because there is hope. But it all starts, as you said, with controlling our mind and the ideas that we're entertaining through habit and just habitual repetition. Did you want to say something?
But there's someone that's listening that is like, but he's still allowed. He let all that happen, and you don't know what he's allowed and let happen in my life. So what do you say to that?
Are you talking about God allowed?
Yes. I mean, I hear that on and like, well,
I
why would he
know.
allow
No, I
that?
know.
And I had to experience. What is your thought regarding that?
That is the tough thing about this life. Is that there's this author who said something to me during this time. I read his book, and he said, if you don't understand that the context in which we live is a battle, you're going to misunderstand 90% of what happens to you. That's a very profound statement. In other words,
can you repeat that, John?
if you misunderstand that the context of this life is a battle, if you don't understand that, you're going to misinterpret 90% of what happens to you. In other words, if I'm on a cruise ship in the Bahamas and all of a sudden missiles start coming at me, like, I'm completely shocked and taken by surprise. Like, what is this? This isn't a battle. This is a cruise, right? But if I'm on a battleship and I'm a part of the Navy and we start taking missiles, I jump into action. Like, I'm trained for this. I know what this is. We are in war, and I know what to do. You're not shocked by it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to decide, okay, well, where is it that I live? And I do think, I don't think it's hard to realize that there's something wrong in this world. And we all struggle. Man, I'll tell you, that's one of the things as a pastor. Everybody thinks they uniquely struggle. No, everybody struggles with something.
I'm happy. I'm glad that you said that, because, I really think that we all experience what everyone else is experiencing. It just comes in a different shape or form. But
It does.
But then I think our perspective of it also either enhances it, or we have a different understanding of it.
that's through awareness, right? And so this is why, if you're listening to our conversation again with John Burke, the best-selling author of Imagine the God of Heaven, get this book and read it, and read it over and over and over again, because it's through the repetition of the ideas in his book that will help you grow in your awareness. So it's like the armor that we need, John, to combat the evilness, the evil force, right, that comes at us, because that's what's happening every day. Maybe we could segue there into what we were talking about off screen here was for NDEers that have maybe they are watching above, they're floating. You talked about many times Jesus shows up for that person, but you also have many experiences from stories you've heard from NDEers where it's not Jesus, it's his counterpart. What can you share about that?
Yeah, you mean hellish
Right.
near-death experiences. Yeah.
Right.
Or just the reality of evil. Yeah, and let me say one thing before we go there. I'll go there, but something that Jesus did say to that guy Kevin, who we talked about before, died on the table having dental surgery. And he showed him the thoughts
Right.
in his soul that had darkened his soul, that were things his father had said that were lies that he had taken in. Jesus says to Kevin, you need to go back. It's not your time yet. And he's like, I don't want to go back there. No, it's an evil place. It's a bad place. Look at all the things we do to each other down there. And Jesus said something interesting. He said, you must tell people that is not God doing that. That is the ruler of this world. And he's constantly trying to get people to think God is doing this. Now, that is also confusing because God is allowing these things, but he's allowing them for a time, and a very short time. He is allowing us to experience the knowledge of both good and evil, but in a temporary experience, not an eternal experience. And so this even goes, and the reason for that is that we can make mistakes, we can do wrong, we can sin, and we can still be forgiven. We have a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. Why? Well, because again, I think what God is teaching us is that he is love. And when we choose love, when we choose God, when we choose to follow him, that's best for us. It's best for all humanity. And that when we cross over from this life into eternity, where we don't live in this temporal, time only moving one way, so therefore you have a second chance and a third chance, it's just eternal time. I think those decisions then become eternalized. And that's just my philosophical idea, but it does play in. And here's how. To your question about hellish near-death experiences. So having studied close to 1,500 near-death experiences, I'm shocked by how many of them also talk about the reality of hell, the reality of evil angels, fallen angels, just as much as they see good angels. And so there is something real that is going on. And that's why I said the power of evil is in the thought, is in the lie. And we can fight evil by fighting those lies that try to then turn us and move us against God or against one another. But yes, so I'll give you one of the most riveting examples. I write about him in Imagine Heaven. Howard Storm was a university professor, tenured, and he was an atheist. And he spent a lot of his time, trying to convince his students they were stupid if they believed in God. He was unfaithful to his wife. He said he came to a place in his life where he realized, he rejected God and thought the biggest, baddest bear in the woods wins. So that's what he was like. Mm-hmm. And then he's on an art tour in France, and his lower duodenum ruptures. And apparently you have like 5 to 8 hours at the most before, it floods into your body cavity and kills you.
You're done. Yeah.
And he couldn't find a surgeon because it was Saturday. And he dies. Now, he thought when you die, it's just lights out, unplug the computer, screen goes dark, there's nothing. And so he was confused because one minute he's in the worst pain he's ever been in his life. And then all of a sudden he's standing up by his bed and he feels wonderful. He feels great. And he still feels like himself, except these heightened senses of being alive. And then, he's kind of confused of what's going on. And he hears these people in the hallway of the hospital saying, Howard, come with us. And he thinks it's the hospital staff. and he says, I'm sick. I need a surgeon. And they say, oh, we know all about you. Come. Don't you want to get better? We're here to help you. Come with us. Hurry. We need to go. And he's a little confused because he can't see him clearly, but he thinks it's the hospital staff come to take him to surgery. So he starts to follow them. Well, I'll let you read it in the book. It's a crazy, wild story, but basically they deceive him and they lead him into this place that he said was darker than the blackest black. It's exactly what Jesus talked about when he said that the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he realized they were deceiving him. He tries to get away. And first they start to just taunt him and cuss at him and hit him and push him. But then he realized they're just playing with me and they're fully enjoying it. And I've talked to Howard probably 4 or 5 times about this story, and he'll tell me the details. And then at a certain point he goes, I can't go any farther because I literally had PTSD from it.
He doesn't want to. He doesn't want to go there. Then
it's not a dream. It's realer, more real than this life is what near-death experiencers say. Of both the good, of these incredible heavenly experiences, of beauty and wonder and colors beyond our spectrum and the love and the light of God and reunions with this welcoming community, all the good, but all the bad is also more real than this.
So John, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, keep going.
Well, I just wanted to say something important. Because Kelly asked a very important question is why would God allow all this suffering? Why does he allow these things to happen? What if he allows them for a time in mercy? So in other words, we think all the horrific things we go through and all the sufferings are just so horrible. And they are. I'm not at all negating that. Those sufferings of this life are horrible. But what if they are a very diminutive experience? In other words, what if God has shrunk it all down into a 70 to 80 year time capsule and we experience 1/100th of the good that's to come, but also of the evil that's possible? And in other words, he's actually mercifully letting us get a little taste of heaven and a little taste of hell so that we will choose God and we will follow him and we will follow his ways of love. And because again, we go back to free will. God's really given us free will, which means we are truly free. He can work.
And free to ask for forgiveness, as you said. That
Free
we
to
can't
ask
ask for it over and over. It's not a one-time thing. But John, how do you interpret all of your experience with people that end up in hell permanently versus people that all of us, that we're all sinners, obviously. So at some point, I think what you're saying is to end up in heaven, you have to repent and ask for forgiveness. Is it that and black and white or?
Well, that's the amazing thing that I think people misunderstand. And I think this is one of the greatest lies that permeates civilization is that, why would God be, so harsh? And why would he, be so condemning? And, when in fact, what he claims that he did through Jesus is pay for all our wrongs to be forgiven, past, present, even future, so that any heart that turns to him and wants his love, his forgiveness, his guidance, that's all it takes. And he says, my son, my daughter, come home. Mm-hmm. I love what he said to Karina Martinez. She grew up in Colombia. She was abandoned by her parents. They took her at 16 to America, and then the parents left her with the grandmother. Like one day just disappeared, literally. And of course, you can imagine a 16-year-old girl who can't even speak English trying to make her way. She got abused. She got teased and mocked. She had abandonment issues. She did everything possible to prove that she was lovable, right? And some really bad stuff. She got pregnant as a teenager. She had an abortion. And really, the abortion was even against her will, but she had nowhere to live. And they said, if you don't abort the baby, you're on the streets. Anyway, she had pretty much rejected God because of all the bad things that had happened to her. But in COVID, she has a near-death experience, and she finds herself floating up above her husband, sees him there, and suddenly she realizes, oh my gosh, it's real. The afterlife is real, heaven is real, hell is real, God is real. And she grew up Catholic, and she starts praying the Our Father, right? And she gets to forgive us as we have forgiven others. And she's just like, God, forgive me, forgive me. I realize now, forgive me. And at first she said she knew she was going to hell. She knew it. That's the other thing on the other side is there is an understanding of truth that we can pretend and rationalize and hide and cover, but you can't over there. It's like, you just know. And she knew, and then a light comes and turns her around and brings her up, and she sees this light and all these people saying, come, and the Lord saying to her, come, Karina, come. And she says to him, I'm not worthy. She feels this incredible love. She feels this, when the light touches her, she feels this incredible love, just like flow through her whole body, but she feels unworthy because she sees herself as, all that she did. Mm-hmm. And he said, no, you are worthy. And what she realized once she goes in is that God made her worthy because he had already paid for all that. And all she needed to do is turn to him. That's all it took.
But it sounds like when you said, I'm not worthy, and he tells her you're worthy, that you still have the free will of choice. And someone could, I guess, stay in that state of shame and say, I'm not, and they stay there. Do you know what I'm asking?
Well, I mean, so that's the other thing about near-death experiencers that have confirmed something that one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, who was an Oxford scholar, an atheist for many years, but he came to faith in Christ later. And he said this, he said that he believed that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. That hell is the free will creature in rebellion against God, finally getting what he thought he wanted. And I think that is what near-death experiencers confirm.
What he
in
thought
other
he
words,
wanted.
What he thought he wanted. God does truly give us free will because love requires free will. And, like this one near-death experiencer, Erica, is there in God's presence, experiencing all this incredible love. She gets this, interestingly, she too got a little lesson from God. He shows this picture of dropping a huge stone into an ocean that was completely calm, and one ripple going out that keeps going out. And he said, Erica, you are the rock, and that is the ripple that your life can make throughout humanity. It goes out through humanity, and your thoughts and your words and your deeds affect all of humanity. That's what he said to her. And interestingly, that's what near-death experiencers in their life review see, that there is a ripple effect of our kind actions, that the smallest thing, like Kelly, what you were saying, of just thinking about the guy who has to go put the cart back, I mean, nobody's going to give you an award for that. But you thought about another, and that did not go unnoticed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, I want to go back to, you said just a minute ago that you can't hide. When you're like, we hide here, but we can't hide there. And we know, we have total awareness. And so, when you're looking at that life review, and I know it's coming from compassion, but then you still know how you impacted others. And I believe that you had said people have jobs there. Like, is one of those jobs an opportunity to change that, or to? I'm asking if you could go into that. Like, do you know
From
what I'm?
what from what near death experiencers tell me, that when God, now you have to remember something. So a near death experience is not crossing over into either eternal life or eternal death. It's not. It's something in between. And one of the commonalities I found that I write about in Imagine Heaven and Imagine the God of Heaven is that there is a border or a boundary that many of them come to in this near death experience. And they know, I can't cross over and still go back to earth. If I cross over, I cannot go back to earth. In some cases, Jesus tells them, you can cross over and go on into heaven, or you can go back. And so what I believe these near-death experiences are a while still somehow tethered to this life. There's something in between earth life and eternal life. And I think that's why even in this experience, people can still make temporal decisions that affect them in their. So even Howard, in that hellish experience I was telling you about, interestingly, he has this thought in his chest, pray to God. Now, this is fascinating because here he is literally in this hellish experience, being mauled, brutalized, raped. I mean, everything. That's what he said. And he hears in his chest, pray to God. And he thinks, I don't believe in God. He hears it again, pray to God. And he's like, I don't pray. What God would I pray to? Why would, third time, pray to God. And he remembers a song from being brought to church one time as a kid, Jesus Loves Me. That's all he could remember. And in his desperation, he cries out, Jesus, save me. And he starts just speaking the name of God. And into this darkness comes this light, gets brighter and brighter, brighter than the sun. These creatures are gone. Arms reach out and pick him up and take him out while he's just bawling like a baby. He said, because he realized how wrong he was.
That's a great
And
segue, John. I want to ask you this question. In our real life experience, and in the story that we depicted in the ravine, Danny, after he has killed his wife and his son, and Joanna, who is a character again that hears the voice of God, she's explaining to Mitch and Carolyn, which were really Kelly and I in this film, that Danny succumbed to the darkness, and he believed the lies, and he was hearing two stories, but the lies he started to believe were that he was unworthy, he was not loved, all of these things that you're talking about, and he went forward and did what he did, but then at the ravine, when he's going to go over the precipice and kill himself, he cries out and he says, "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me." And so, are you saying that through your experiences all these years, that it is probable that Danny ended up in heaven? That's what it sounds like that you're saying.
well, I don't know, because only
We
God
don't
knows the
know,
heart.
but you're saying that
Yeah.
that he could have.
Well, I mean, the very last thing Jesus did hanging on the cross is he hung between two criminals,
Mm-hmm.
and one on his right, one on his left. And the one on his right did what many of us do. He said, so you think you're God, huh? Prove it by getting yourself down off the cross. And by the way, get me down off the cross too. So it was a prove it, God, by doing what I want. And Jesus didn't even respond to him. God doesn't respond to our demands to prove himself. The other thief or criminal said, don't you fear God? We deserve this. We deserve what we're getting. But this man, referring to Jesus, he's done no wrong. And then he asked, he said, Jesus, when you come in your kingdom, so he's just recognizing, I believe, when you come in your kingdom, will you remember me? That's all he asked. And Jesus said to him, almost the last thing he does on the cross, today you'll be with me in paradise. That's God's grace. It makes no sense to us.
It doesn't.
because-
And it's interesting because, in the film, we're saying that he's placed in heaven, and it made a lot of people angry because they have an idea of what is forgivable and what is not. Here, they have an idea. And then it's like they decide. And what do you say to that?
Oh, I have compassion because I understand, because it comes out of a place of deep, deep pain, right? I mean, I'm sure if you're feeling that way, it's because you have been deeply wronged. You have been deeply wounded. And I think the important thing to realize is place the blame where it's rightfully associated. In other words, this world is dominated by much evil. So don't go to the side of evil, go to the side of God, because ultimately, and this is what near-death experiencers say again and again. I mean, I have interviewed, and in the books, I have many people who suffered horribly. Melanie was a 7-year-old who made friends with her next door neighbors, who then basically raped her until she died at age 7. Wow. And
it's horrible.
She's up above her body watching this happen, and Jesus is there, and he said, everything's going to be okay. You're with me. And it's a long story. It's in there. But bottom line is she went through a whole process of healing as she grew up, and even forgiveness of these horrible men who did this to her. And one of the things that God did is he used her forgiveness actually she was able years later with a counselor, and I think that's an important thing, to email him and tell him he forgave him because of what Jesus had did for her. And she realized that he was captive to evil and that God wanted him free of that evil as much as he wanted her free. And he actually did come to faith. And I don't know the full story of how his life turned or changed, but that is what we have to realize. The only way that evil is overcome in this world is one life at a time, life by life. And so, yes, evil did something horrible to you, but if you hold on to vengeance and you say, vengeance is mine, and I will not forgive, even though God is willing to fully forgive you of everything, then what you're doing is you're rejecting what God has done to forgive all of us. And what you've got to hold on to is that God is just. He is just. Nobody's going to get off. Everybody's going to see, and everybody's going to know. So you don't have to be the judge. You can let it go. The other thing, though, that's so important is unforgiveness. And I didn't make this up, but unforgiveness is like drinking poison in order to hurt your enemy. It doesn't work. It poisons you. Your enemy is not poisoned by your bitterness or by holding on to unforgiveness. And so, yeah, Jesus gave some pretty radical parables about this. He gave a parable of one man who owed $10,000, and his master was going to throw him in jail because he couldn't pay the $10,000. and he begs his master for mercy, and the master says, okay, I'll forgive you. And the master pays his 10,000 debt. And that guy goes to someone who owed him $100, maybe thinking, I don't ever want to get in that situation again. And he goes to someone who owes him $100 and demands him to pay him, and he can't pay him. And so he throws the guy in jail for a $100 debt. And Jesus says, that's what it's like when you won't forgive your fellow person, but I'm willing to forgive you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Something to think about. For sure.
I just want to ask, this will be my last question, I promise. But do you believe then these near-death experiences, the purpose of them, or for those to come back and teach us? Is it for them, obviously, to make maybe different directions in their own life? What do you think that is?
I think it's both. And many of them know. I mean, they've told me. They say, I knew God wanted me to come back to testify about this, to
make
tell
a
the
difference.
reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And to, to help us see. And what I'm trying to show is that what they're saying is nothing new. I mean, God has revealed these things already, and we can live them out. But I think what the near-death experiences, when you hear it through their words again and again and again, and how they overlap, I think it takes a black and white picture and puts color on it. Right? And you start to realize, oh my gosh, like, I think when you read Imagine the God of Heaven, all these questions about God, like, why would you allow this? And what do you really like? And do you really love me? Or do you really care about me? Are you really a friend? It's like, those will go away if you really see what these people are saying and what God has been revealing. And so I do think I think they're coming back. And by the way, I mean, it's just in our age that we're able to hear. I interviewed 70 people from every continent that have had these near-death experiences and are experiencing the same God and hearing the same things and kind of getting the same lessons. They all boil it back down to, it's all about love, how we love God and how we love or treat one another. And so I think, in our age, as information and, who knows what's going to happen, but it's all accelerating. And I think God is just giving greater testimony of himself to us. So it's for them to learn, but I think it's also for them to share this with the world.
Well,
and that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
And we love that you're doing what you're doing. Thank you. And it's what I'm hopeful for is it sounds like it's a fairly simple formula. Like, this isn't
It's incredibly simple.
Like rocket science stuff. It's love, be loved, love God, love your neighbor. I mean, it's all the stuff that most people have heard and they're aware of, but moving it into action is another thing. So Thanks for helping us do that today, John. I know we're running up on time, and we're going to let you go. But again, we're with John Burke today. Go check out all of his books. Learn from him. He's an amazing man. This is our second segment of our time with John Burke. And again, this was our kickoff to 2025. And John, thank you for sharing with us. We're honored to have you on today. I want to continue following you, and good luck with your podcast. I know you're up and running now and rocking and rolling. So
you can hear directly from some of these people that I've interviewed on the Imagine Heaven podcast.
Oh, nice.
All right.
I'll be listening.
Me too. All right. Don't forget to share and like on your platforms, and we'll see you again on the next compelling episode of Time for Forgiveness.